lectures that are available through the website. Next slide. You can also learn a little bit more about our course, the leaders behind it, some of the ideologies, and understanding more about our course objectives, and some of the presenters as well. Next slide. Just some classroom reminders to maintain yourself on mute. If you do have a question or would like to participate, please raise your hand or participate in the chat. And we do have a land acknowledgement to for you to view within our course site. Next slide. I want to introduce our speaker, Rachel Lyons, who's going to be discussing mutual aid, jail support, and the end of money bond campaigns. Rachel Lyons is the daughter of Diane and Dan Lyons, sister to Ruth, John, Lauren, Mark, and Casey, partner to Therese, and aunt to 4 little humans. She's a member of the Chicago Community Jail Support Mutual Aid Group and the co-executive director at the Chicago Community Bond Fund. She has done a rapid response jail support connected to protests and uprisings since 2017 and has been involved in daily jail support efforts outside of Cook County Jail since 2020. Rachel has a decade of experience in social justice, education, facilitation, and nonprofit leadership. Rachel holds a BA in anthropology from Washington University in St. Louis and an MA in social justice and community development from Loyola University. Please welcome our speaker, and thank you so much for being here, and I'll let Rachel Lyons take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Rachel speaking. Thank you for the introduction and the welcome. It is good to be with you today. I'm gonna share a few slides and share a little bit about my work in mutual aid and jail support here in Chicago. And I'm also eager to get to know folks in our Zoom room here a little bit today, and we'll ask for folks to respond to a couple things in the chat. You can also unmute and share out an answer or a contribution. And I hope this can be participatory and shared. So thank you. I do want to just take a moment before I share slides to just send energy and love to Dexter Reed's family. I know for many people in the Chicago community and beyond, it's just a tough week. And for folks who have not heard, Dexter Reed was killed by Chicago police in March, and there was body cam footage released on Tuesday, and there were a couple press conferences that happened and a gathering on the West Side Tuesday night that I was at with several other organizations supporting Dexter Reed's family. So just want to take a moment of quiet for us to honor his life and to send comfort to his grieving family. We can just take a deep breath in and let it go. One more time, deep breath in and let it go. Thank you. Are we good on slides?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, thank you. So again, just welcome. Thank you for being here with me. I feel honored that you all are here. I will, as I said, share about a bit of my journey and work in mutual aid and jail support. And I first just wanted to start off thinking about coalition building and community. This is a picture. You'll see different iterations of this picture, but this is a tent where jail support is based outside of Cook County Jail here in Chicago. And just to start off, I'd like to ask a question, just invite you each to think about when was a time that you felt a group of individuals turn into a community? How did that energy shift for you? Was it something internal or external? Just curious about that kind of transition moment of like going from a group of individuals to actually becoming a community. And I'm intrigued if there's any brave souls who want to type in the chat or come off mute or raise your hand and just maybe give an example of a time where you felt that shift from we're just a group of folks and like now we're a community. Awesome. Thank you for folks who are answering in the chat. I won't read everyone's, but I see Zoe Strong at 5:39 p.m. said, I find that this happens for me when I sing with a choir, sharing the making of music together. That's beautiful. Thank you. And Connor Driver at 5:40 p.m. said, at the end of a week of summer camp. Absolutely. And Annie Shutt at 5:40 p.m. said, COVID incident command center at a hospital I worked at. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And folks are welcome to continue to add to the chat. I think it's just an interesting thing just to notice, right? When there's this moment, this shift that happens, and we can feel it within us and also feel it in the air around us of we're a group of individuals and now something has happened. There's been like an incident or a celebration or a moment, and now like we're a community and we're something more than we were before. So I just want to hold that sense of connectedness and relationship and coalition building as we talk today, because really mutual aid is focused and steeped in relationship, and not a relationship that's around transaction or winning or competition or anything really that has to do with capitalism. Like the relationship is about supporting each other and transforming ourselves and our conditions for our own like liberation and freedom. So with that context, I just wanted to share and like give props to communities that have supported me along the way. I've been a part of various faith communities, churches, my grad school community here in Chicago. I also lived in Emmaus House, which is a Catholic worker or like an intentional community. I've been a part of various political action communities. My first kind of job out of high school was canvassing, going door to door for environmental justice work in South Dakota. I then worked in Baltimore around abolishing the death penalty, and then have continued work in abolition here in Chicago. I've also been a part of anti-racism communities, showing up for racial justice, and I facilitate an affinity space for white folks working on anti-racism. And also just neighbors, being a part of various community gardens, also just being outside on my street, saying hello to people, saying good morning. And I like to be a regular. I'm a regular, like the bank I go to where I make deposits for work. I'm a regular with like the UPS person who delivers packages to my building. So I just try and think when I'm in the world, like, how can I be in deeper relationship with people around me? So with that grounding, I'm gonna walk us through today thinking about three of the main kind of principles for mutual aid. And these were also connected to the Dean Spade reading. So you might recognize some of these kind of key points around mutual aid projects. And the first one really is that mutual aid projects work to meet survival needs and build shared understanding about why people do not have what they need. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. It's a risk. You can take it. Invite you to close your eyes and go somewhere in your mind where you feel safe. Just take a couple deep breaths where you are in that place of safety. And just notice, what does safety feel like? Maybe observe one or two things that are present in your space where you feel safe. We'll take one more deep breath in that safe place wherever you are, and let it go. And we'll open our eyes, come back to our shared Zoom space. In a similar way from the beginning, invite folks to drop in the chat where you went, what place you went to that feels safe, or the one or two things that were in kind of your surroundings when you feel safe. If you'd like to come off mute or raise your hand, you're also welcome to do that. Thank you for the answers in the chat. I see Tiffany N. Ford at 5:46 p.m. I went under the covers in my bed, LOL. There are a couple of folks who mentioned cats. Zoe Strong at 5:46 p.m. said on the couch with my cats purring. Katie O'Connell at 5:46 p.m. said in my room with my dog and partner. So yeah, hearing some themes around like softness, people we trust, creatures, creatures that we love. This sense of maybe even, yeah, home or family. Beautiful. People can continue to drop in the chat if there's anything else. We do that exercise often in abolitionist spaces because we want to make sure that there are gears turning for imagining our own safety and our collective safety that don't involve armed officers, that don't involve cages, that don't involve the current structure of state violence. And today, we will talk about the site of Cook County Jail as one place of institutional harm that is proclaimed, right, to be a part of public safety, to be a part of order or even justice. And there's this narrative about individual people creating harm, and then the jail is a response, that's like a consequence of that harm. Perhaps even they posit that it's a place of correction, right? Hence the term Department of Corrections. And today, as we sift through thinking about mutual aid and showing up in the sense of collective safety, we will begin with the site of the jail as actually the place that creates the harm, that by its existence in our city, it ensures harm will happen. That the system has already predetermined conditions of metal cages, of moldy food, of gray water, and this environment of trauma. And then it seeks to find people to fill up that space within those walls. So I say that as the kind of orientation for today and invite each of you to just take care of yourselves this afternoon, especially folks in the space with us who've been deeply harmed personally or have loved ones harmed by the carceral system and state violence. So take care as you need to today. Just to start, a bit of context for Cook County Jail. It is one of the largest single-site jails in the United States. A little bit of just for terminology, jails generally detain people pre-trial who either can't afford bail, which we no longer have in Illinois, which we'll talk about in a moment, or folks who are held no bail, or for people who are serving a sentence that is less than a year. And prisons are cages for folks who are already went through a trial and they were convicted and sentenced. So right, there's 100,000 people are pushed through the jail each year. The jail population is down in Cook County, which is a good thing. And there's been an incredible amount of advocacy and work to get that number lower. Currently, the folks who are incarcerated in Cook County Jail is under 5,000 people. And at one time, it was nearly double that. The other piece just to remember is that while there's around 4,500 folks currently in Cook County Jail, there are still also about 1,600 people who are on electronic monitoring who are incarcerated in their homes. You'll see on Cook County Jail's statistics, the numbers will say community corrections. That actually means electronic monitoring, which is simply incarcerating people in their homes. So while folks are, held in the jail until their next court date, they're subjected to total loss of autonomy, continued abuses by staff in the system, which really has repercussions across their lives. When people are released, they often leave and don't have somewhere safe to go to or transit to get there. They don't have their phone, money, or ID, which might be at the police station where they were booked. And many folks who leave have lost housing, lost jobs because of their time sitting in jail. So in the face of that, Chicago Community Jail Support is a mutual aid project that I'm a part of, and we offer daily support outside of Cook County Jail for anyone who's released. We're there from about 6:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. each day. Some days we don't have enough folks to show up and we aren't able to provide support, but most days we're out there for some amount of time. We began in May of 2020, really as an initial rapid response support system for the hundreds of people that were being released after arrests from demonstrations during the 2020 uprisings and continued protests against police violence and anti-Black racism. And from there, realizing folks were being released not just from protests, but from all sorts of things, our goal was really to provide anyone released with material and social support. Some people have really urgent needs. Some folks just need 5 minutes to wait for their ride. And we offer both of those things. We also, as a network, support one another, share political education, and do our part in the ecosystem of abolition work. Any questions thus far on just some of the basics? I know we'll have time for conversation later too.
I had a question on Dolores. I live very close to Cucanillo, and I am glad I hear you say you can offer a right to the people who relieve from jail, because sometimes when they release these young people or people from jail, sometimes they get hurt outside, killed. And I'm very happy to hear that, because so many cases about these young people being relieved anytime and they hurt or be killed close to Cucanillo. And I wonder, you still had manifestation or protesting. I want to be join that, to protesting. And there we went Saturday and Sunday. We have 2 Sundays away. We have walking around Cucanillo and talking about the issue you mentioned it. And from the Cucanillo, we had a manifestation with community members, especially a family who has somebody in jail. And we there, protesting about the injustice, about all the trauma they experienced with the police brutality and things like that.
Thank you. I appreciate, all of what you said, and there's, so much deep truth in the dangers, of folks who are released, and the total lack of support that the jail offers, especially releasing people sometimes at really late hours of the night or early morning and not into a safe situation. And thank you as well for just naming the continued resistance and community support to show up around Cook County Jail, especially for folks who have loved ones inside. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll continue, and folks can continue to ask questions or save for our conversation as we move on. So just review. That first one was about mutual aid is meeting survival needs and building a shared understanding about why people do not have what they need. And so building from that foundation, again, really back to the importance of our relationships with each other, that our survival depends on each other, that mutual aid projects mobilize people, expand solidarity, and build movements. And one of those large movements that I briefly mentioned was just the actual end of money bond in Illinois. The Pretrial Fairness Act was a piece of legislation that was passed in 2021 and wasn't fully implemented until September of last year, completely taking out any money from the equation of pretrial incarceration. So for previous to that, folks in Illinois were held on a money bond pretrial that they would have to pay and post at Cook County Jail before their loved one could be released. And now money is not a part of the equation. Again, the carceral system is still a classist, racist institution. And this was a small crack to try and get at taking away some of that power and no longer allowing simply folks who are rich and could pay for their freedom, pay for it, while people who are poor could not. I'm also happy to talk more about that campaign and that fight to end money bond in our Q&A time as well. But just wanted to make sure folks had that context for right now. So just to give a little example and texture of what jail support has agreed to do in terms of this tenet of mutual aid, of building solidarity and building a movement. We did not explicitly start as an abolitionist project. we were in the thick of supporting people in 2020 and really helping folks survive. You know, there were folks released from police stations who had broken arms or a concussion or just like needed immediate support because of the police brutality. And that was like our immediate focus. And then after jail support had been going for several months, we really got together and came up with community agreements. We really built more political education along the way, but we had those foundational relationships in community and then worked to make some of these agreements. I won't read all of them on the slide, but I think important just to note, you know, we are practicing abolition where we, particularly in Chicago, are drawing from knowledge and experience of generations of Black organizers, and that we did not create mutual aid or come up with it. You know, this is a part of communities going back to Indigenous communities and caring for each other and building systems that that thrived even in the face of really harsh oppression and harm. And we also understand that jail support is this temporary intervention. We wish we didn't need to be outside the jail, but we're trying to reduce the harm created by the jail and the entire carceral system, and that this is our like part to do to abolish the prison industrial complex and forms of policing. Our community agreements continue on the next slide here. Again, just this idea for mutual aid to continually be collaborative, relationship-based, community-oriented, particularly noting here Black, Brown, and Indigenous self-determination and autonomy, and fostering a culture of learning, growth, accountability, personal boundaries, transformative and healing justice. The last one here might be helpful. I know for your next class, you're talking about more the like nuts and bolts around this work. And I think this really comes up in some of our meetings of being committed to being mindful of power structures and centering marginalized voices as we navigate our interactions, even day to day. So those were some of the larger like community agreements and philosophical pieces that we talked about. We also then, as we continued the second piece of, we're mobilizing people, expanding solidarity, and building movements, a lot of people learned about jail support and thus the harm of Cook County Jail through social media. These were some of our tweets from 2021. There was a polar vortex that was incredibly cold and terrible, and especially for folks who were being released in a t-shirt or without shoes or without like proper coats or didn't get their bus pass from the sheriff's office, like all sorts of things. So we had people out there doing jail support and then kind of live tweeting and saying, here's what's happening, you know, 5:15 p.m., someone was released with only thin leggings, a short coat, sneakers, no socks. Temperature is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, we continued to document things that were happening on the ground and really got a lot of following and attention and amplified so that a county commissioner called us, actually currently Mayor Brandon Johnson, when he was a county commissioner, called us and contacted us and said, how can my office like leverage our power with the sheriff's office, et cetera. The sheriff's office, you know, said we give bus passes, a phone call, and coats to everyone. We knew that was a lie. And I will say there was some reinforcement, like there was some reinforcements given, and we saw some increase in coats being given and things happening. Was it perfect? No. Again, we were trying to reduce harm. So this was our small way of like putting the sheriff, Tom Dart, on blast and to say, this actually isn't true what you're saying. People are not getting what they need. Again, this page documents other tweets that were happening. We also just do a ton of fundraising through social media. And again, I guess I should have said this at the beginning, but we are not a nonprofit. We are just like a collective network of people. No one is on staff. No one gets paid. All of our work is funded through donations, and we're currently looking for a new fiscal sponsor. So there's a lot of back end things to like work through for that. But yeah, that's kind of our current setup. But we've been going strong since May of 2020. We're also able, when we connect with someone on the ground who's released, who needs longer term support or housing support, depending on our capacity, you see on the far right, we are getting funds for Stephanie. We're able to amplify mutual aid asks for people in the community and get them support for rent or utilities or childcare, things like that. I'll also just name the last year in 2023, there was, several weeks when folks were coming out reporting no clean drinking water, black substance coming from faucets, no soap, no cleaning supplies, the conditions in jails are never good. And then this was like on top of that, the water was gray or black. And so again, we were able, because of our proximity and like firsthand accounts from people, we could then amplify that and push back. And so we're able to, post and do some political education for people on a wider basis and, share people's quotations or just share some of their experiences just to make sure that people are acknowledging what's happening inside the jail, because so many people, right, are just behind walls, that it's this like fortress that we don't get to access. And we want to make sure that what's really happening is shared on a much larger platform. For time's sake, I'll also just move to this last part. During the pandemic, in the spirit of, yes, we are focused on jail support, and also because of our presence on social media and our political education, we were able to build further solidarity when folks were quarantining in 2020 and 2021 for workers who were not able to get support, who couldn't work remotely, and so couldn't provide for their families. So some folks in our collective were like, let's set up like a quarantine funds for workers. And they received requests for support and they received funds and then tried to match up funds as best they were able to the requests. They were able to distribute an amazing amount of money. And I think it just showed us that kind of what I said earlier, once that group of individuals becomes a community, there's a lot of power there to shift change. And while day to day we are focused on jail support, when things like this come up and someone has an idea, there's already folks ready around you to say, yes, I can help with that. And then it becomes a reality and we're able to move money to people who are quarantining and who need it. I share this slide just to give you a sense that like I know I said a lot of words and we have a lot of, agreements and thoughts, and also we're just like a scrappy group of people who show up when it's raining or snowing or like whatever's happening outside. I remember I sat outside. We have a van that we use to transport supplies back and forth. There was a tornado warning. And so I sat outside of Cook County Jail with all of the tent and all the supplies packed up in the van and just like waited for the warning to end. And then it did, and we set up and we had jail support. So, you know, we definitely keep ourselves safe too. And we also try and show up because we know people will be released regardless of the weather. And the picture on the right is just, yeah, the table has various things on it. We offer snacks and drinks, Gatorade, cigarettes. We have like first aid support. Excuse me. Clothing when it's cold out, tampons and pads for folks who are menstruating, who maybe don't have access to that while inside, and then phone calls. And if we have drivers, then we can give folks rides as well to where they need to go. I'll pause here if there are other questions or just responses right now.
I had a question, Dolores. You familiar with Colby House? Colby House is in California in 24. I wonder you connected with them to find jobs for people who released from jail, and because I am involved in Colby House, and that thing we had every month get together with the families and try to get things for bring to jail, like personal things for the people there. And but that thing I wanna know a little bit better is about what opportunities provide for people who's released from jail to work, to find jobs.
To find jobs. Yeah, I am aware of Colby House. Thank you for naming that resource. And we do have some referral organizations at the tent to offer to people. I'm happy to connect or chat more after today. I can put my email in the chat. I do and if other folks in the room want to share connections to job opportunities, I will say that for our group at Jail Support, we are a little more focused on like a rapid response. And then we know other folks have more expertise in terms of economic support for job connections. So we're usually a connector. We don't always continue long-term for the job opportunities. But again, we definitely receive referrals or connection to make sure people can get where they need to go and find additional job support for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Janice, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, I first of all, thank you for what you do, because it is important to have that kind of support. But as someone who, we call it prison ministry, that I worked or participated in about 30 years ago, one of my frustrations was, how do we lift people? How do we motivate them to say, I don't want to return here? Sometimes I worry that we sort of help people become comfortable in a bad situation, and that sort of mitigates any effort or some effort on their part to not want to return to that particular situation. I get what you do, but at any point, do you see yourself sort of, even if it's passing on or doing a quick needs assessment and passing on that person to someone else to say, you know, perhaps this individual is ready for some counseling? And that's pretty much what I did 30 plus years ago, because we don't want to just continue to just do this, you know, without there being some kind of goal to change outcomes or improve
Mhm.
life.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate the question and your own work and history. Thank you. Yeah, it's a big system. It is well funded. It is well resourced, and it is, by system, I mean like the prison industrial complex as a whole. It's well resourced and also well respected by many, many people, right? In our communities, and is seen as the norm of how our society does things, of how we respond to harm. And so I hear and absorb your question about this wrestling with what it means for someone to be in Cook County Jail and leave, and what are the conditions or the likelihood that they will return, and how to interrupt some of those conditions and those pieces. And I will first say I don't have all the answers. And I will say I do grapple with and wrestle with those questions, absolutely. And I'm curious and interested in more of us asking those questions and having those conversations about who's in relationship with people who are directly impacted by the carceral system. I'll be very honest, like myself as a white person, I grew up in South Dakota. I've been in Chicago for about 10 years. I could name 10 people if I, lost my job or was like in a really tough situation or was incarcerated. I have people I can call on who are well resourced, who have money, who have a place for me to stay. And I think when we think about our relationship maps, right? It's like who is connected to whom and where are resources concentrated. And I know for me in a lot of white communities that I interact with, there are a lot of resources and wealth that's concentrated. And for kind of what you're talking about, this like larger scale change, getting at root causes, right? A lot of that wealth and support will need to shift. And this is, much bigger than jail support. So I'm also interested in like each of us today. Jail support doesn't need to be your thing that you do. You can certainly come support and be outside Cook County Jail. And whatever piece or part of the world that you see that is contributing to the carceral system, that's contributing to harm and racist policing and like classist policies and anti-Black racism, like for you, wherever you can interrupt that, like then go, like do it. And so I think it takes a lot of us doing a lot of different levers to make that happen. And I'm just curious about how each person in this room uses their own creativity to get and chip away at that larger system. That was perhaps a rambling answer. But I appreciate the question, and I think we could all take it to heart and really think more deeply about it. I will keep it going through this last principle, but this is very helpful discussion. Thank you to all of you for listening and sharing. The third one that I want to name is that mutual aid projects are participatory, solving problems through collective action rather than waiting for saviors. Also, a part of this is thinking about somewhat like what are the implications of building the possible world that we need and want. a little bit on my answer to that last question, excuse me, is that I might have one idea about, interrupting the carceral system or trying to reduce recidivism or people's return to jail or prison. Someone else may have a very different idea, and those ideas might be in conflict. So yes, mutual aid is participatory, and that means there's conflict. Like, we have to grow and change and shift together as humans and navigate really hard conversations and action together. And so I hope to just plant that seed for y'all to continue to turn your gears about. And next week, I think they'll be a little more teed up around that. But it's a big question to imagine a world without police, without prisons. And to imagine that together and try and work united is difficult. And it doesn't mean we all have to do the same thing, as I said. We need lots of strategies. We need lots of tactics to make this happen. And one of those pieces is just to call back to Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who is often spoken about in abolitionist work. From a quotation, abolition is not absence, but presence. And that the actual, like, the material space, the geography of abolition is so important. And so for us, taking up physical space at 27th and California is really important. We weren't always a purple tent. We were once just like somebody's, trunk with a cooler and some Doritos. Like, it was very bare bones. And then, right, people are like, oh, what are you doing over there? Oh, are you selling this? Oh, it's free? Oh, my kid and I can have some while we wait for our loved one to be released. Like, wow, thank you. We've been waiting for 3 hours today and we don't know when they'll be released. And then they're like, oh, here, I'd love to just give you $5. Like, thank you for doing this. And then someone else comes, right? And like, it builds. But that physical presence there, we eventually moved onto the grassy area between the California boulevards. We didn't ask anyone permission to be there. We didn't write a letter to Tom Dart. We weren't like, pretty please, can we be there and give support to people released? No, like, we were there. And that is true of any like rapid response, jail support.
I can grab the door.
Outside of police stations.
Amazing.
There isn't a sense of asking, right, for permission. You just show up and you're there for your community and for your people. So we've also just evolved what that tent has looked like. There's been a clothing rack. We try and also just like put supplies out there because we want to respect people's autonomy and their choice. We don't say you have to take this or you need this or what do you need? It's like, hey, welcome. Like, I'm glad you're out. We have some things to offer. You can look through it. So I think that just especially coming out of a place where you are given, as I mentioned, like, if you are given food, it is not good. You have no choices. You don't have clean water or clean conditions. To come out to a space to say you have choice and power and autonomy, we want to make sure that is protected. Also, just giving a little nod to the way that we collect supplies. We do, like in the winter, a supply drive, and again, community sourced clothes and resources and food donations. We also have a storage, this picture in a garage on a house in Lawndale. It's actually a community house where I used to live. Half of their garage they've just given to us, and they support us and allow us to use that for storage, which is incredibly helpful. Is it sometimes really messy and disorganized and then we reorganize it? Yes, it's like a human project that just evolves, and sometimes is really super clean and organized and sometimes super messy. We also have we have also grown in like we have someone who's a graphic designer who then created this kind of logo, Chicago Community Jail Support, and who we are. And you'll see in the picture on the right, kind of that gravel on the ground. Just another way that we were like, we're not waiting for anyone to help us or fix this. Like when it rains, it gets very muddy. So we just started filling it in with gravel by the grass just to make it so there's a place we can set up the tent, etc. There have also been like potholes around where we like park the van or are, and people have like filled those in on their own. So we're just trying to make the space as hospitable as possible for people when they're released. I will just, for the sake of time, I want to just pause here if I should just do these last few slides about nuts and bolts, or we should take a break.
I think we could keep going.
No, let's just take a break if it's
Break?
like a
All right, let's do
lateral.
it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Let's take a 5-minute break. I'll put it up on the screen.
Am I good to jump back in?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. It's happening. Okay. So just to give just a grounding in this is what it looks like for us to do jail support. It's both simple and complex at the same time. For a bit of a visual, these are the different roles that happen to make sure jail support is like peak successful. Do all things happen every day? No, but we try our best. So just to give a little more context for the work that happens in jail support, we usually communicate with each other via Signal, which is an encrypted messaging app. We have a large group of folks on Signal. It's over 500 people in that chat. And then we also, that's for kind of like daily updates and support. We also use Discord for our broader organizing and resource sharing, also for working groups who do work behind the scenes, not just daily and jail support. And I offer both of these as like, these are simply tools you can use should you see a need in your own community. Again, it might not be jail support. You might see something else that needs to happen, but we have found both of these as helpful tools in organizing a mutual aid project. For us, we try and set up different options for people to participate in jail support. Someone might be able to come volunteer for 2 or 3 hours. Great. But somebody else might just have 30 minutes. And some days I just need someone who can drive our setup van for 30 minutes and that's it. So I think the other takeaway I hope to share about mutual aid is that yes, it can be a large part of your world, and it can also just be something you or others opt into when you are able. And that it does really make an impact. So we set up at 6:30 each day. Someone drives the van from the house, from the place we park it in North Lawndale to the jail. We set up the tent, the tables, the coolers, and make sure if we have any like hygiene kits or first aid items or things, clothing that we're giving out, we set that up. And then we break that down around 11:30. There's 2 shifts of people. So if people are they're 6:30 to like 9, and then 9 to 11:30. For folks who are on the ground, or we say OTG, folks distribute supplies. They also just offer their cell phone if they're able for people to connect with loved ones. People released might get one phone call on their way out, but they may not have reached their loved one or be able to set up a time to get picked up. People on the ground also help coordinate rides with drivers if we have drivers available, just to check in with them, make sure their route is okay, support them if needed. Our drivers are there when we have them. Sometimes we don't have enough people to offer rides because we always maintain 2 people at the tent. Often folks who are released who have only been at CCJ or at Cook County Jail for a short time need to go back to the police district where their belongings are, their cell phone, their wallet, their belongings. And so the driver might take them there first and then to their final destination. We are also currently reimbursing drivers, and so we try and make driving accessible. If folks have access to a car or even a shared car, but they maybe can't afford the gas, because sometimes folks are being released in Chicago from Cook County Jail who live way further out in Cook County, and it's a long drive. We try and reimburse people for their mileage to allow them to be able to afford the gas for that. We also have daily schedulers who help just manage our volunteer schedule and let folks know what spaces we have open for the night or where we need support. Currently, I schedule 2 days a week, but we also, support each other when we need to take a day off or help out. Again, it's just about those relationships and the community support to help each other. When we're able, we have housing on call. So sometimes we have a daily volunteer who can be that really key referral service. If someone on the ground is talking to someone released who needs a hotel for 2 nights or is on electronic monitoring or just like needs some more concrete material support. Sometimes we'll have someone in the group chat on Signal who has the capacity that night to do some referral service. And sometimes that is kind of like a social worker or someone who is able to volunteer in that capacity. It doesn't happen all the time, but when we can have it is really helpful. And finally, just as our mentioned before, there's a lot of behind the scenes things happening. We're currently seeking a new fiscal sponsor. Our past one, the organization is closing. So these are some working groups that happen behind the scenes. Supplies helps organize the garage that I showed you and any storage and backup supplies. We have an internal communications group, external communications for social media. There's the harm reduction and housing support group, advocacy coalition building, events. We have our welcome squad for new volunteers and people who have questions. And then, as always, our van and winter prep group. The van is very old and needs a lot of love and support. The handles regularly fall off on the doors. So blessings to our van and winter prep group who keep our van running. So I show that to y'all just to say that, again, if someone's really into spreadsheets and finance, you can also help mutual aid in that way, or you love fixing cars. People also need help with that. So you don't have to force yourself into a different place or skill that you might not want to use to do this movement work. Use the skills that you have, things that you're passionate about, that you enjoy doing, and offer that in the spaces that you're in. That is the slides that I had. Shout out to SlidesGo for the slides. I will stop sharing and leave space for some conversation. Y'all have been so patient. I talked a lot. Thank you for listening. There were some questions earlier, yes?
Yes, we have kept track of them, so we can read off some of those questions, and then we can, if anyone wants to unmute, feel free as well. And I saw some thank yous in the chat and some hand clapping reactions for you.
Thanks, y'all.
Katie, do you want to take the lead in reading off the question?
Yeah. So Tiffany Ford at 611 asked, what was the process and experience of developing the community agreements?
The community agreements, we started having those meetings in 2020. The group, May and June were more, focused around rapid response. And then probably in, I think like July and August into the fall of 2020, we had several meetings as a general group to like create the structure of jail support going forward. And then within that, there were probably just a handful of people, 3 to 5 people, who said, we'd like to start drafting the community agreements. And there was kind of a conversation between like in our general meetings, and then a smaller group would go and like draft, make some edits, and bring that back to the larger group. And I think some of those came from just like our own experiences in doing rapid response jail support and other mutual aid. Some of them also just came from recognizing like our place in the abolitionist work already happening in Chicago, and kind of, giving nods to like other groups that had supported us. So yeah, it was a lot of conversations. All of that happened on Zoom also, mostly. Some happened, we were doing jail support in 2020 and 2021, with masks on, trying to be as safe as possible. We were out, thankfully outdoors, which was helpful, particularly at the height of COVID. So yeah, it was just a lot of conversation and some conflict, as I mentioned before, of what should be included or not. So that was most of our process. Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. Also, if anyone wants to come up and you feel free to do so. But I'll ask that question that just came in from Ahana Gupta at 639. Are there ways in which Chicago Community Jail Support is looking to build capacity? I know you touched on this a bit, but would love to hear more.
Thank you for asking. We, as any like volunteer mutual aid network, no one is paid for this work. We're not a nonprofit. We are just a collection of individuals who became a community. And it really ebbs and flows. There are times when we have kind of regulars for several days of the week. So like, I think off the top of my head, I know like Mondays we have regular folks who've been coming for shift Mondays like since 2020. We have Thursday regulars. It does shift though, some of the, especially now that with the implementation of the Pretrial Fairness Act and some shifting times around, like there's not bond court, but first appearance, release times have been different. And we've noticed also later at night. And so we have shifted our schedule. We used to be there closer to 5 or 5:30. Now we're there at 6:30, try to stay till 11:30. I'll be honest though, that we know there are people released even after we are gone after 11:30, which I think is horrible that people are released that late. So in terms of building capacity, we have like a good amount of regulars, but we haven't done like a jail support like welcome training in a while. So this is a good reminder. We have done in the past virtual trainings just to give people an orientation of who we are, what we do, using some of the slides that I shared tonight. And that is usually a helpful orientation to get new folks to support. I'll be honest that, to put on those trainings and to welcome a new wave of people also takes energy and capacity. So it's a balancing act. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We have another chat question from Kat at 609. Do you know of any local groups doing this work outside of prisons? I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kat. I think that means other mutual aid projects unrelated to jails and prisons.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you guys are operating outside of Cook County Jail. So I was just curious about any groups doing this work outside of prisons as well.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that I have a couple thoughts. For prisons, at least, in Illinois, often similar for other states, prisons are often located in more remote areas. And so ongoing support or like a volunteer base, right, is more limited, since prisons are often in a rural or more remote area of a state. I would say also prison releases are fewer and far between, and that they are more scheduled. So I have heard of like Mothers United Against Violence and Incarceration. They've done different like buses to go and like either visit, to take loved ones and family members to visit people in prison, or for releases, or Chicago Torture Justice Center, I think has also done that as like, welcome rides or support for folks who are released. So I think that I've seen that more often on like an individual basis when someone is released from prison after serving a longer sentence, but would not be as common to have like a daily or weekly presence like outside of the jail. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, Yvette.
Thank you so much for the different insights that you share with us and the work that's happening that is very much grassroots and very much motivated through individuals that have the passion to see justice in these areas that we're seeing a lot of injustice, right? I think I have like a really strong reaction to what you're talking about in terms of like the system not prioritizing some of these like racist practice or prioritizing against rectifying and creating justice around these processes, especially like within a justice system. So I guess how do you determine what are the priorities of your group? Do they shift based on membership? How do you understand like these needs that individuals that are being incarcerated have? I know that we did talk a little bit more about like these structural components of who's responsible for this, like who has to provide society with the safety and reassurance that there is a safety net. I know that a lot of it can do with like communities and programming, but I live in the community where the Cook County Jail is. And it seems like it's an engine also like infiltrating our psyche and to think through, you can end up here. Like it's so close, it's so available. And it becomes like this looming pollutant in our neighborhoods, and what's going on inside is even more devastating. So I guess just thinking through like some of your group's priorities and how they shift, and what are you seeing are like some of the pressing needs that happen most currently, and then what are we thinking about like influx of new groups too?
Thank you, Yvette. And yeah, just +1 to what you said about the jail in the Little Village community, and yeah, the ways in which that physical structure, that environment is so harmful for folks inside and outside of it who are close to it. I think of like the park that's right there that overlooks like barbed wire and the jail, and how scary, how scary that is. Right, a park built on like a landfill, built on, you know, past harm and environmental injustice for that community. And I think just even that image, like the compoundedness of like, there's like literal toxins underneath this park, and it is next to this structure of state violence. It speaks volumes. And I take to heart your question of who is responsible, and I hear that as like a good call in mutual aid spaces of, yeah, like how do we on our community level take responsibility for each other, and what's the larger responsibility of our government, of people in power, of folks who have a lot of resources and money and power, like what are they doing with it? Who are they keeping safe with it? So I think in your question about how do we determine priorities, I again feel like we try and balance the work of like doing that larger political education, and as you said at the beginning, staying grassroots and like really listening to folks when they're released to say, are these the snacks that you want, or like these cigarettes, like someone got cigarettes one time and we tried to give them out, people were like, we don't like this kind. And I don't smoke, I didn't know. So there's also like, right, there's those big like shouting ideas around like, wow, the park and the jail and this like huge structure of trauma, and how do we stop it? And then there's also just like a conversation with a person in front of you to say, what would you like? How can I be of support to you? How can I listen and learn and figure that out? So I think we try and stay in touch with the larger conversations around abolition and writing and practices. And we also, try and just learn from who's in front of us, as well as, like, as I mentioned, the loved ones briefly, folks wait outside Cook County Jail for their loved one. They don't know when they'll be released often. So they're waiting in cars, or, they'll come and get snacks at the table. We try and have sometimes coloring book or something for kids to do. So I think we've also, just evolved and shifted the more we talk to people who are there, and try and build those relationships. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for doing this work. I just want to direct us to the chat as well at 6:50. Shannon Ryan said, very well said. We have to often just focus on the things we can do and not get discouraged or overwhelmed by the magnitude of the issues underlying it all, right? And the different situations that are happening within all that nuance. Tiffany, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for your presentation. I guess continuing with this conversation of priorities, when you were presenting your slides earlier, you talked about how, you all started off focused on jail support, but then there was a period where y'all shifted to offer support for quarantine workers. And I guess I was hoping to hear a bit more about that. I'm wondering if at any point during that shift, folks who were active in the group felt like you all might be losing focus,
Mm,
also wondering how you all were able to not get burned out while taking on that sort of additional mutual aid work. And
Mm.
also wondering, I mean, I think while groups are going through like sort of shifts like that, like in focus, sometimes you can have people who are like, I'm not with this like new direction, and they might decide to leave. So I guess, yeah, I'm curious if you can just say more about some or all of those things. And before I stop talking, I do just want to say thank you for all the setup you've done for next week's class, where we are going to be having a lot of conversation about working joyfully together. So yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. So yes, the piece about the supporting quarantine workers, thank you for clarifying. I didn't explain it great the first time. So it was I was trying to illustrate that we had this group mobilized for jail support, and that continued. And then there was like a parallel effort. And there were some folks from jail support who were like, hey, we want to start supporting quarantined workers. And jail support continued during that time. There were just there was like some cross-pollination, I suppose, perhaps the term, that there were people trying to get off the ground money for quarantine workers. We had a captive audience of folks who either followed jail support on social media or who came through in person at the tent to both donate and also amplify the message of the need for funds for quarantined workers. So I would say it was a bit of like an offshoot. And to your point, though, I think there were a couple folks who were deeply involved in both jail support and the quarantine workers, and they got really tired. So I do think it is an important piece to think about what is the group's focus, and like as a community, what is yours to do right now? I think it's also like it's a humbling thing to do to say, actually, this is ours to do. We want to do this well. We can't be all things to all people. That's not going to work. So yeah, I think our own, it'll even, the quarantined workers fund happened for a while, and then it eventually closed, partly because folks could return to work, but also partly because, yeah, people who started it just were tired and had done a lot of legwork and weren't able to maintain like the back end of that to keep transferring the funds. So that's what I'll say to that. I hope that was helpful context.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. In the chat, Katie mentions that she recently read Microactivism by Makari L. Williams, who really encourages focusing on 1 or 2 issues max. Are there any other questions or thoughts, reflections?
Maybe I like to make a comment about because I live in Little Village and people in Little Village need to be informed about be more conscious about Kukani Jail, because we see that building there and we pass through that building every single day, but people not realize, some people not thinking an injustice in Kukani Jail, because some people not have nobody in Kukani Jail, some people has, but maybe to have more infograms about empathy or something, to people understand when somebody released from jail, like you mentioned, sometimes they release with no jacket and things like that, and they asking people for money to take the bus, and people get afraid to see somebody strange coming out for so many years being jail and then released. It's gonna be confusing for the people who release from jail and for the people from the community. Maybe that people need to be aware about these kind of reliefs for people from Kukani, and people will have more empathy, or maybe when these people approach community member and asking for, can you give me some money for the bus or something, people feel comfortable to share, with the people, because you're not always there. You think not always there, and people be released anytime.
Mhm.
That kind of stuff.
I completely agree. And yeah, I appreciate everyone's like attention here tonight. And each of you, I think something helpful that someone said to me was like, well, now that you know, like, so what? Like, now what? So I think it's, yeah, what is it for you to do, as you just so wonderfully said, of like, how do we then share with our neighbors and share with folks in Little Village, share with folks in surrounding communities about these realities, and to continue to build that political education, that consciousness. And yes, political education can happen in a classroom. It can also just happen in a conversation with somebody, and happens over time in small ways and big ways too. So thank you to
Maybe one day you can come and maybe have a presentation in the community in Spanish, and explain the issues in Cucanilleo, because a lot of people, they don't know what is really Cucanilleo, what will really happen in Cucanilleo.
Yes, I'm happy to, I will put my email in the chat. It's out there in the world in many ways, so I am happy to share it, and I welcome further conversation and planning.
Thank you.
Thank you again. We really appreciate your activism and lifting up these topics and inviting us to understand and participate within the context and space. And we're all learning and we're all growing, and we really appreciate that partnership and thought partnership, and trying to deconstruct our own views on how we can push forward and be creative to build that new path. And really, that's the essence of this course. So we really do appreciate you enlightening us with the different work that's happening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate your time, and just like send you a lot of energy and some fire for the future.
Thank you. Next week we have an amazing presenter, Dr. Tiffany Ford. So please join us for that. We're very excited to have her talking about working together on purpose, consensus building, shared decision-making, and maintaining equity. Can you go back to the slide before this? And then for our final class, we will be having a film screening. It will be via Zoom. We had previously announced that it was going to be hybrid, but there were some tech issues, so we're going to keep it virtual to maintain the integrity of the class and the presentation of that film. So we want to invite you all virtually and include ourselves in a discussion if there's time at the end of the film. Please feel welcome to join us for the next 2 weeks. As usual, we have the students going into a breakout room. So I'll have those that are registered students in the course, please join us there. We'll start back at 7:06. And for the rest of us who are still remaining here on the Zoom, this is a shared space for you all. Please feel welcome to stay on, connect, communicate, conversate, and have some reactions to today's talk. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.